My name is Savannah Russell. I'm 28 years old, and I want you to understand something before I tell you what happened. Before I explain how I dismantled 5 lives with nothing but patience and the truth. I was a good person. I really was. I believed in second chances and the inherent goodness of people. I believed that hard work and loyalty meant something. But then they taught me that kindness is just another word for weakness in a world that rewards cruelty. And once you learn that lesson, once it's carved into your bones by people you loved and trusted, you can never unlearn it. It started on a Tuesday in March in Portland, Oregon, in the office of Morrison & Blake Marketing, where I'd worked for 3 years, climbing from junior associate to senior project manager, pouring 60-hour weeks into campaigns that won awards with my name conveniently absent from the credits. I just finished a presentation to our biggest client, Cascade Electronics, a $12 million account that I'd personally saved after their previous campaign tanked. I walked back to my desk feeling that rare moment of professional pride, that fleeting sensation of being valued, and that's when I saw them. All 5 of them huddled in the glass conference room. Marcus Chen, my boyfriend of 2 years, Rebecca Walsh, my best friend since college, Dylan Morrison, my direct supervisor, Tasha Green, the HR director I'd confided in about everything, and Jake Palmer, the colleague I'd mentored and protected from getting fired twice. They were looking at documents, passing papers between them. And every few seconds, one of them would glance toward my desk with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold calculation mixed with something that looked almost like pity. I remember the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the smell of burnt coffee from the break room, the way my heels clicked against the tile floor as I walked toward that glass room. I remember thinking maybe they were planning a surprise for me, maybe a promotion or a celebration for landing the Cascade account. I remember being that naive, that trusting, that fundamentally stupid about the nature of the people closest to me. I opened the door without knocking because these were my people, my inner circle, my safe space in a cutthroat industry, and the moment I stepped inside, the temperature dropped 20 degrees. Not literally, of course. But you know that feeling when you walk into a room and realize you're the subject of a conversation that just stopped. That feeling of being an outsider in your own life. Rebecca spoke first. Her voice had this practiced gentleness that made my stomach turn. "Savannah," she said, "we need to talk about some concerns that have been raised." I looked at Marcus, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. His jaw was set in that way he did when he'd already made a decision and didn't want to be challenged. Dylan was sitting at the head of the table like this was his courtroom and he was the judge. Tasha had her HR folder open with my name on the tab. And Jake, sweet Jake, who I'd covered for when he showed up drunk to a client meeting, Jake was looking at me like I was a stranger who'd just threatened his family. They laid it out methodically, clinically. Like surgeons cutting into something already dead. There were allegations of misappropriation of company funds, falsified expense reports, taking credit for other people's work, creating a hostile work environment. The documents they showed me were real. They had my signature, my email address, my handwriting, but the context was stripped away, twisted, weaponized against me. That lunch with a client where I paid with the company card because Dylan's was declined. Now it was unauthorized personal expenses. Those late nights when I fixed Jake's mistakes and put both our names on the reports. Now it was me stealing his work. That time I firmly told Rebecca she couldn't leave early again because we had a deadline. Now it was hostile and aggressive behavior, creating an unsafe workspace. I tried to speak, to explain, to defend myself. But Dylan held up his hand. "Savannah, we've documented everything. We've given you every opportunity to succeed here. But this pattern of behavior is unacceptable. We're terminating your employment effective immediately. Security will escort you out and will mail your personal items." I looked at Marcus and said, "What about you? You're just going to sit there?" And he finally looked at me with these dead eyes and said, "I can't enable your behavior anymore, Savannah. This is for your own good." Rebecca nodded like she was so sad about this betrayal, like she hadn't helped orchestrate it, like we hadn't stayed up hundreds of nights talking about our dreams and fears and futures. The security guard was waiting outside the conference room, a kind older man named Bill, who'd always complimented my work ethic. He looked embarrassed as he walked me to my desk, watched me throw photos and coffee mugs into a cardboard box. I could feel everyone in the office watching. Some looked away, some whispered, some looked satisfied, like they'd been waiting for this. We walked past 3 years of my life, past the awards wall, where my contributions were credited to other people, past the break room, where I'd celebrated birthdays and commiserated over lost pitches, past Marcus's desk, where a photo of us at Mount Hood sat facing away from where anyone could see it, The March rain was coming down in sheets when Bill walked me out the front door. "I'm sorry," he said. "You seemed like one of the good ones." Seemed past tense, already erasing me from present existence. I sat in my car in that parking garage for 2 hours, watching the rain, watching employees leave for lunch, watching my life dissolve like sugar in water. I called my mom in Sacramento, but couldn't speak when she answered. I called my sister in Seattle, but it went to voicemail. I tried to cry, but nothing came out. I was too shocked, too numb, too completely shattered to process what had just happened. Then my phone started buzzing. Texts from mutual friends, emails from professional contacts. My LinkedIn was blowing up. Someone had posted about my termination, about the allegations. The story was already spreading through Portland's tight marketing community like a virus. By evening, I was unemployable. My name was poison. 3 years of reputation building destroyed in 3 hours. The worst part came that night when I went to Marcus's apartment. Our apartment, really, since I stayed there 5 nights a week. My key didn't work. He'd changed the locks. I knocked and knocked until he opened the door with this expression of practiced regret. "You can't be here," he said. "I'm sorry, but I need space to process everything." "Process what?" I said. "Process the lies you helped create." He shook his head like I was being irrational. "This is exactly the kind of aggressive behavior they were talking about, Savannah. You need to take responsibility for your actions. Get help. Work on yourself." And then he closed the door. I heard the deadbolt slide into place, heard him walking away, heard my life ending in the sound of footsteps retreating into silence. I spent that night in a Motel 6 off Highway 26. The room smelled like cigarettes and broken dreams. The TV was stuck on a local news channel. I stared at the water-stained ceiling and felt something inside me that had always been soft begin to calcify into something harder, colder, more purposeful. I realized that everything I'd believed about fairness and justice and goodness was a fairy tale for children and fools. I realized that people like them, people who smile while they destroy you, people who weaponize your trust and kindness, people like that only understand one language. And I was about to become fluent. I spent the next 2 weeks in that motel room planning, researching, building a case with the kind of meticulous attention to detail they'd taught me in project management. Funny how useful those skills became. I created spreadsheets and timelines and documentation. I recovered every email I'd ever sent from my personal backup drives. I went through 3 years of text messages and photos and receipts. I contacted every client I'd ever worked with under the guise of starting my own consulting firm. I asked careful questions and listened to their answers. I befriended people they'd wronged before me, disgruntled former employees, angry ex-partners, competitors who knew where the bodies were buried. I built a network of information that would have impressed the FBI. What I discovered was that I wasn't the first. I was just the most convenient. Rebecca had done this twice before at previous companies. She'd build intimacy with successful women, learn their weaknesses, then orchestrate their removal and slide into their positions. She was 3 months away from being promoted to senior project manager. My position, Dylan had been cooking the books for years, small amounts that added up to almost $200,000. He needed a scapegoat when the auditors started circling, someone whose access and signature could be blamed. Jake had been selling client information to competitors. That's why he was always broke, despite his salary. He needed me gone before I noticed the pattern of lost pitches. Tasha was having an affair with Dylan and had helped him falsify HR documents before. Marcus was the simplest and saddest of them all. He'd been cheating with Rebecca for 8 months and needed me out of the picture without the guilt of breaking up with me directly. I learned all of this in 14 days. 14 days of phone calls and coffee meetings and carefully casual questions. 14 days of playing the victim while building an arsenal. 14 days of letting them think they'd won while I prepared to salt the earth they stood on. I thought about confronting them, thought about violence, thought about public scenes and dramatic revelations. But that would have been emotional, reactive, temporary satisfaction. I needed something permanent, something that would follow them forever the way their lies followed me. I started with Jake because he was the weakest link. I created an anonymous email account and sent his client information sales records to Morrison & Blake's biggest competitor, to the state licensing board, to every client he'd sold out. I included timestamps, bank transfers, emails he'd stupidly sent from his personal account. He was fired within 3 days, charged with corporate espionage within a week. Last I heard, he's facing 5 years in federal prison and civil suits from 6 companies. His LinkedIn profile is gone. His reputation is ash. He'll never work in marketing again. Tasha was next because she'd used her position of trust to hurt the most vulnerable. I sent her falsified HR documents to the state labor board, to every employee she'd ever wronged, to the Professional Ethics Committee for Human Resources Practitioners. I included the affair with Dylan because workplace relationships between HR and executives are violations of every corporate policy ever written. She was terminated for cause, lost her license, her husband filed for divorce. Last I saw, she was working retail at a Target in Beaverton, explaining to customers why they can't return items without receipts. Dylan took more work because he was careful, protected, connected, but everyone makes mistakes when they think they're untouchable. I hired a forensic accountant, cost me $3,000 I didn't have, but worth every penny. She found the paper trail, the shell accounts, the falsified expenses that pointed back to him once my name was cleared from the equation. I sent her report to the company's board of directors, to the SEC, to the IRS. I sent it with a detailed explanation of how he'd set me up to cover his tracks, included every email and document that proved my innocence. Dylan was arrested at the office on a Tuesday morning, handcuffed in front of everyone. They say he cried. They say he tried to blame it on me even then. But the evidence was too clear, too damning, too complete. Last I heard, he's serving 7 years for embezzlement and fraud. Rebecca was personal. She'd been my sister in everything but blood. We'd dreamed together about the lives we'd build, the success we'd achieve, the friendship that would last forever. She'd held me when I cried about my father's death. I'd held her when she got her heart broken. We'd made promises about being in each other's weddings, about being godmothers to each other's children. And she'd burned all of that for a promotion and my boyfriend. So I burned her back. I reached out to every woman she'd done this to before. We compared notes and built a case. We contacted the women at her new company where she'd just been promoted to senior project manager. My old position, we warned them. We showed them the pattern. We made sure they were watching when she started targeting her next victim. And we made sure that when she made her move, they were ready with documentation and witnesses and a lawyer. She was fired for creating a hostile work environment, for falsifying her role in successful campaigns, for systematic bullying and manipulation. She tried to get another job in marketing, but everywhere she applied, someone had heard the story, seen the evidence, known what she really was. Last I heard, she moved back to Michigan, working for her father's insurance company. The dreams she stole from me now permanently out of her reach. Marcus, I saved for last because he hurt the most. He'd told me he loved me, told me I was his future, told me he wanted to build a life together. And all of it was performance, comfortable lies from a comfortable man. I could have exposed the affair, could have made him look bad, but that felt too simple, too clean, too easy for him to recover from, so I waited. I watched. I learned that he'd started dating Rebecca officially once I was gone, watched them post happy photos from restaurants I'd introduced him to, watched them at work events in the company I'd built my career at, watched him living the life he'd stolen from me. Then I sent an anonymous email to Rebecca. Detailed proof of every girl Marcus had been sleeping with during our relationship, during their affair, and for the 2 months they'd been officially together. I included hotel receipts, text messages I'd recovered from his old laptop that he'd let me use for freelance work, photos that mutual friends had innocently shared. I made sure she knew that while she was destroying me to be with him, he was already moving on to the next woman and the next and the next. They exploded spectacularly. The kind of workplace breakup that gets people fired. She filed a harassment complaint, he filed a counter complaint, the whole office took sides. It was brutal and public and exactly what they both deserved. Marcus was eventually fired for creating a hostile work environment, the same thing they'd accused me of. He's working at a startup now, making half his salary. His reputation in Portland's marketing scene is toxic. Everyone knows what he did, what they both did, and nobody wants to work with people like that. As for me, I took everything I'd learned about their crimes, everything I documented and verified, and I sent it to Cascade Electronics with a detailed explanation of what had really happened, why their campaigns had been struggling, who had actually saved their account. They hired me as an independent consultant at twice my old salary. They introduced me to 3 other major clients. Within 6 months, I had my own firm, Russell & Associates Marketing. Within a year, I had 15 employees and $5 million in revenue. I hired every talented person who'd been pushed out of Morrison & Blake. I built something clean and honest and successful. Everything they'd tried to steal from me, I created bigger and better on my own. Morrison & Blake collapsed within 18 months. Turns out when you lose your biggest client, your senior leadership gets arrested, and your reputation becomes synonymous with corruption and betrayal. Companies stop wanting to work with you. They filed for bankruptcy last October. The office building where I'd been escorted out in shame is now a co-working space for tech startups. I drive past it sometimes just to remember, just to feel the satisfaction of watching something rotten finally decay into nothing. I'm not proud of what I did, but I'm not ashamed either. They taught me that the world doesn't reward goodness, it rewards power. They taught me that trust is a weapon people use against you. They taught me that sometimes the only way to survive is to become the thing that hurt you. A force of nature, unstoppable, merciless, final. They ganged up on me thinking I was weak, thinking I would break, thinking I would disappear quietly into the background of their successful lives. But they were wrong. I didn't break, I transformed. I became the storm that tore through their carefully constructed lies. And when the winds finally stopped and the dust settled, I was still standing and they were ruins. I still see them sometimes. Portland's not that big. I saw Jake's mugshot in the Oregonian, saw Tasha scanning groceries with dead eyes and a name tag, saw Dylan's sentencing hearing covered by local news, saw Rebecca's LinkedIn profile disappear, saw Marcus at a coffee shop in the Pearl District looking diminished and tired. They don't see me, though. I make sure of that. I've learned to be invisible when I want to be, to move through spaces without leaving traces, to watch without being watched, skills you develop when you've been hunted, when you've had to rebuild yourself from ash and rage. My therapist says I need to work on forgiveness, on letting go, on moving forward without carrying the weight of what happened. But she doesn't understand that the weight isn't a burden, it's ballast. It keeps me grounded, keeps me focused, keeps me from ever being that naive, trusting version of myself again. I don't want to forgive them. I want to remember exactly what they did, exactly how it felt, exactly what it cost me, because that memory is armor, protection against ever being hurt like that again. Sometimes late at night, when I'm alone in my downtown Portland apartment, the city lights spreading out below me like fallen stars, I think about the girl I used to be, the one who believed in fairness and friendship and love. I mourn her sometimes, the way you mourn someone who died young, before their time, before they got to see how the world really works. But mostly I'm grateful to her, grateful that she was soft enough to be broken, because in breaking she became something harder, something sharper, something that cuts through the lies people tell themselves about being good people while doing terrible things. They wanted me to disappear, to be erased, to be a cautionary tale they told themselves about what happens to difficult women who don't know their place. Instead, I became the storm that erased them, that scattered their lies like leaves in November, that proved once and forever that kindness might be weakness, but cruelty backed by truth is unstoppable. I didn't just survive what they did to me, I turned it into fuel, into purpose, into the foundation of something they can never touch or taint or destroy. I'm 28 years old, I own a successful company. I sleep well at night, and 5 people who tried to bury me are still digging themselves out of the graves I put them in. That's not a happy ending, but it's an honest one. And after everything they taught me about the gap between what people pretend to be and what they actually are, I'll take honest over happy any day. They ganged up on me thinking I was prey, but predators always forget that prey can evolve, can adapt, can learn to bite back harder than they were ever bitten. They ganged up on me and I became the storm, and storms don't apologize for the destruction they leave behind. They just move on to clearer skies, leaving the ruins as a reminder of their power.